Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I've got a really interesting show tonight to introduce autism and how to deal with autism to you with Sarah Glofcheskie, who is the CEO and co-founder of a health technology company with really big goals. It's called BeMeAi, and what she's dealing with is a data-driven platform designed to empower autistic individuals, their families, and their care teams by leveraging the power of technology and holistic data collection, medical, behavioral, and environmental. BeMeAi elicits actionable, needs-based insights that can significantly improve the lives of autistic individuals and ultimately society at large. Sarah, how are you? Welcome to our show.
I'm very well, thank you. Happy to have the opportunity to chat today.
Thank you. So tell me, how did you get involved in Bemi and autism?
This is a very long answer. So Bemi is definitely something that brings together my professional background, and it's deeply personal to me. So my daughter, Flynn, who is now 10 years old, is autistic, and we've been through quite a journey. We've been through issues with standard of care options, and I've been on a path to explore alternatives for my daughter for many years. I saw many needs and have spoken with hundreds of families at this point, things that could be addressed with technology. And so this is something that's been percolating with me for a long time. I've been for years working on bringing the pieces together, working with different professionals, and now it's come to fruition. Bemi was founded only in December, so we're a COVID company, but we've made a lot of progress so far.
And so tell me a little bit about your journey with your daughter.
So my daughter, Flynn, when she was 3 years old, she went through something that's termed a developmental regression. And I don't quite like the term. I don't think it's it quite captures exactly what she went through, but she did go through a period of change. So I had been living in Germany at the time. I was actually doing my MBA, and my husband at the time was home with my daughter, and he started to report to me that she was changing. That she was communicating in different ways, that she was playing with toys differently, that it seemed like she might actually be in pain. This was all very curious to me, but I didn't quite see the change in the same way. However, when I finished the MBA and I started spending full days with her, I could see for myself that indeed something was going on. And so I actually made the difficult decision to pack up, leave Europe, come back to Canada to navigate the medical system in my native language. By the time I got back to Canada, I'd done my research and I figured Flynn was autistic. She showed many of the symptoms of being autistic. And so I managed to get an appointment with a pediatrician and went to the pediatrician, reported all of the changes with my daughter, particularly reporting that she seemed to be in pain. He agreed. He said, yes, this looks like autism, but there's nothing you can do about it. And he dismissed it.
There's nothing you can do about it.
There's nothing you can do about it. If anything, he said she'll get some speech therapy later on in life, but it's a behavioral condition, neurological condition, and we'll just, wait and see how things go for her. And I reported she seems to be in pain. Again, he dismissed it as behavioral and wasn't going to do any further diagnostics. So I was not happy with this response, and I actually got up out of my chair and I walked out of his office. I didn't say another word. And at the time, I didn't fully appreciate all of the whys behind why I did that, but it's really become the biggest why of my life.
What are some of the symptoms or markers of autism? What are they?
So historically, only 2 diagnostic criteria are relied upon to make a diagnosis of autism. One is restricted repetitive patterns of behavior, and the other is deficits in communication. And so those are 2 very broad symptoms for something that is a spectrum condition. And I wouldn't say they always apply, but that's what's relied upon to make a diagnosis.
And you said you noticed this in your daughter.
I certainly noticed changes in how she was communicating. Not every child goes through the same path that my daughter did, where she had been developing typically, and then things changed. But you do hear that a lot. Other children, it's more apparent earlier on. So yes, this was the situation that we were faced, and it was quite striking. And my daughter was actually quite cognizant of the changes as well, and she was even saying it's tough.
What's the cause of autism? Is it neurological?
This is a very large topic. And so there are many theories about cause. I think that we shouldn't really think about a cause. We should really think of this as a difference. And, autistic people are an important part of our society. There are unique thinkers, there are scientists, there are artists, and there are engineers, and they deserve to be nurtured and participate and live whole lives.
And so that's obviously part of your current mission.
Absolutely.
So tell me about the launch of this company. What motivated you to launch the company?
So to go back to the story with my daughter and what I was met with, I wasn't ready to accept that. And so what I did at the time is I resurrected my life sciences background. I have a background in biology. I had just graduated my MBA, so I wanted to take a very methodical and efficient approach to looking into what was going on with my daughter. I delved into clinical research. I read a lot. I met many different professionals, and I learned that not all professionals took the same view as the initial pediatrician that I met with, and that there are many medical and environmental factors at play that if they can be identified, they can be addressed, and people can be supported and they can thrive. So it's all about figuring out the puzzle pieces for each individual. So there's no one size fits all approach here, and that's what we need to do. So this is what I did with my daughter is I started to track everything that I could in her life. So medically, behaviorally, and environmentally, I spent hours tracking as many data points as possible, and anybody who spent considerable time with my daughter, I subjected them to the same thing. Then I spent my weekends pouring through that data, putting it into spreadsheets, looking for correlations, and ultimately hoping to find causation about things. And then I took an iterative approach to make changes across all of those domains.
And this is what the company now does?
This is what we're leveraging technology to do. So in addition to looking for insights where we can connect things across these multiple domains, we've gone through the last 10 years of clinical research. And what we've done is we've pulled out data sets of what they're so-called clinical signs and symptoms, so behaviors and physical symptoms that are associated with different co-occurring conditions that are more common in autistic people. So for example, 80% of autistic children experience sleep disorders. Gastrointestinal issues are 3 times more prevalent in autistic children. Anxiety, sensory processing disorder, depression, these are all very common conditions, but if they go undiagnosed, then that child is at such a disadvantage. They're not going to be able to attend in school and focus. They're not going to be able to do well. So we need to uncover these issues if they exist, and often they do, to put children on their best path. So this is part of what we do, is we put all of this information, which can be tracked in front of families, and we can fast track finding these things for these children. If they have actual data and they can go to a pediatrician and say, look, my child is exhibiting these symptoms with this frequency, and here's the clinical research that backs this up, well, then they can make the case to get the proper diagnostics done.
We're chatting tonight about autism and a fascinating company called BeMeAi and how it's trying to solve some issues with autism and autistic children. We're going to take a break and come back in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody.
Sure.
Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Sarah Glofcheskie. She's the CEO and co-founder of BeMeAi. Sarah has spent over 20 years working across life sciences, software, and tech, and has been with several Canadian companies that have scaled internationally. Sarah sought to combine her professional and personal when founding BeMeAi and is not looking back. She is a passionate advocate for the autistic community and is driven to see a barrier-free world for all. Sarah holds a Bachelor's of Science in Human Biology from Western University and earned her MBA at ESMT, European School of Management and Technology, in Berlin, Germany. That must have been interesting and fun too. And you've just shared with us an interesting story about your daughter, Flynn, who was diagnosed as autistic at age 4. She's now 10. How is she doing?
She's doing very well, thank you. So we've unlocked a lot of the mysteries associated with Flynn in terms of the best way for her to communicate, what makes her comfortable, what makes her uncomfortable. We've dealt with a lot of root health issues, and she's thriving. She uses a letterboard mainly to communicate now, but she writes pretty profound poetry. We've learned that she's taught herself mathematical concepts. She can do double-digit multiplication in her head. She's actually quite an incredible child in her special way.
Wonderful. Has the pain gone away?
Yes. So we went through quite a process. I would say that it took us about 3 years to deal with issues associated with Flynn's gut. So she had chronic GI issues that were clearly getting in the way of, her living her life and being her best self. So she went through a lot of pain and discomfort as we, got different testing done and worked on these issues that were chronic. But with that improving, we saw blooms in communication. We saw, different type of playfulness and creativity. It's been absolutely incredible and certainly life-changing for us.
So she does not speak?
She can speak. She is limited speaking, but it's very difficult for her. So it's taxing. It takes a lot of her energy. And so I don't force her to speak. I want her to communicate in whatever way is most comfortable for her. So she typically uses her letterboard.
And what is a letterboard?
It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a board with letters on it, and she points to them to spell. So she spells words, she spells sentences. Also, if she gets tired, we can write out choices for her, and she'll point to different words.
Tell me about some of the users of your program, and what are some of the success stories?
Sure. So right now we are doing a research pilot with a limited number of families, and it's a very handheld experience. So they are using our app, which has 12 modules. So we're collecting data in 12 different areas. And it's a little bit of extra work for them at this point because we don't have the full app developed. So we're developing it in concert with them. We want to understand how they use it, what they would like to know. And so we've had an intensive several months now working with families. The response has been excellent. So one of the main challenges for families is simply just tracking data and being able to look back and understand how things are changing with their child. So even being able to have a pretty seamless tool to be able to do that is very helpful. But on top of that, we've actually been able to generate actionable insights for these families by looking at the data. So we have 2 categories of insights that we consider. One is right out of their data. So that might be something like a particular sound in an environment seems to be aggravating for the child. Or if they're wearing a biometric device, then we can see maybe a marker of anxiety before a particular activity or something like that. That's a very practical thing. Once they know, they can make changes and they can see if that improves. The other type of insight that we are able to generate or provide comes out of clinical research. So this comes from these data sets that we've compiled. And these are often things that a parent wouldn't know to look for. So for example, yeast overgrowth in the body is something that's common in autistic children.
Yeast overgrowth?
Yeast overgrowth, yes. And this is something that often goes undiagnosed because a parent wouldn't know what the symptoms would be to look for. And often symptoms present differently in autistic children. So we put these symptoms in front of them. So something like excessive laughter can be a sign of yeast overgrowth. This is a condition that my daughter had, but I didn't know that that was something that I should be looking for. But once you're alerted to the fact that this could be, something associated with a health condition, then you can track that. Once that's tracked and you have a couple of months of data and you can take that to a professional and back that up and say, these are the clinical studies that come from, reputable institutions that indicate that this is something that should be investigated. Well, that's a pretty compelling case to get those diagnostics.
What causes yeast overgrowth, and what do you do with it?
Our advisors would be the people that you could dig into the details on that with, but it's a combination of factors. It's usually a cascade of things that leads to an imbalance in the body. Yeast overgrowth is one condition. Other chronic GI issues with autistic children are things like chronic constipation that often, again, present differently. Or if the child is non-speaking, it might be perceived as a behavioral issue, but they're actually in pain. So this is something that needs to be elicited and investigated.
How can people get BeMeAi?
So right now, we have a pre-commercial list where we're offering BeMe to about another 100 families by the end of December. So families can go and they can sign up, and if we're able to accommodate bringing them on, then we will. We're working mainly with Canadian and American families right now, but we do have some international families that we're working with as well. So if the family is interested, please visit our website, BeMeAi, and send us a note.
What's your team?
I'm very, very proud of the team that's come together. It's a very motivated team with a lot of experience. Of our 5 C-level team members, 4 of us have MBAs, and we ask that nobody holds that against us. But we all also have an entrepreneurial background and a software and or life sciences background. So 3 of the C-level team members are serial entrepreneurs and have worked in health tech. Our chief product officer is a 5-time entrepreneur and has worked on building health tracker apps before with connected technology. And then our chief medical and research officer, Dr. Bassem Toema, is a MD, PhD, and a data scientist. Additionally, we have team members with a clinical research background. And so we're building the platform to a level of rigor in design that you would see in a clinical trial. So it has to be very, commercial, user-friendly on the front end, super simple, but then on the back end, you've got a research-grade tool.
Unbelievable. You said something that I found interesting, that you wanted a neurodiverse team. What do you mean by that?
That's right. So it's very important to us as a company to have a neurodiverse team, to have autistic individuals on the team, and to involve the autistic voice. So we do have autistic team members, and we have autistic advisory board members, and that's critically important. Clinical research in the autism space going back years often didn't involve autistic people, and it didn't really look to solve the problems that autistic people would like to see solved. And so that's why this is very important in our design.
How do you think autistic people have different things they want to have solved than their parents or their friends or their family members?
Well, unfortunately, historically, a lot of treatment for autistic people has sought to control behavior, but a lot of effort hadn't gone into understanding that behavior. And so a lot of autistic children and autistic adults historically have been put on pharmaceutical drugs, and they probably didn't need them. They probably had other co-occurring conditions that could have been addressed, that could have mitigated some of those issues with the behavior. So if we actually seek to understand what's problematic for autistic people, we're going to have happier autistic people. And I think, that's what we all should be striving for.
Explain the name BeMe.
BeMe is really, I hope it stands for itself. It's about, allowing the individual to thrive, to truly be themselves. And so if we can create an environment where an autistic person is happy, then they don't need to be someone else. It's not, kind of, sort of be me. It's truly be me.
What's the future of BeMe?
Well, we have big goals. Certainly, we'd like to get this in the hands of as many families as possible globally. This is not an expensive technology for the user. And so we hope that this will be able to fast track some answers for families and some clues. So, instead of experimenting with very expensive therapies, maybe they can identify more quickly what actually might help their child. So as we amass bigger data and we look at aggregate population level data, we'll be able to see some profiles. We'll be able to say, this helped a child with, some similarities to your child, perhaps start here, rather than what a lot of families do, which is what I did, which is experiment with many different therapies at the same time. And then you get stuck in the situation of not knowing, what actually might be harming my child, what might we be doing that's expensive, but actually not effective. And then, what is actually helping? It's the big question.
We're chatting about autism tonight and a great new company called BeMeAi that is dealing with some of the issues by coming out with an app that tracks different behaviors and then tries to I guess with that data driven information come to some solutions. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Sarah Glofcheskie, who is the CEO and co-founder of BeMeAi, a health technology company with big goals. They've developed a data-driven platform designed to empower autistic individuals, their families, and their care teams, where they want to leverage the power of technology and holistic data collection, both medical, behavioral, and environmental, to provide actionable, needs-based insights that can significantly improve the lives of autistic individuals and ultimately society at large. Sarah, tell us, what are some of the insights that this data can provide?
Sure. We've learned that part of the journey in using an app like this is education. And so even by putting different options for tracking in front of a family, they learn about different things that they could be looking for. One of our modules tracks episodes. And so episodes are periods of distress for the autistic individual. In some cases, these can be quite severe and they can occur frequently and they can occur daily. Obviously, that's something that can get in the way of quality of life for the autistic individual and for the entire family. So what this module tracks is sort of two distinct types of episodes. One is a tantrum. So a tantrum is something that any child or even an adult might experience. And it's really, it's a period of a willful expression of anger or frustration. So if my daughter wants her third popsicle and I'm not ready to give her third popsicle, she may have a tantrum. So we would track a tantrum. But very differently with autistic individuals, they may experience something called a meltdown or a shutdown. So meltdown is something that is completely unwillful, and it's a period of complete sensory overwhelm. And it's sort of like an emergency brake. So it could be sound, it could be a different type of sensory overwhelm, it could be physical pain that actually might cause a meltdown. And it may be very different for a parent to distinguish between a tantrum and a meltdown. But once you understand what a meltdown is, then you can provide support to help regulate in that moment. So for example, many autistic children like to self-regulate with electronic devices. So they'll watch YouTube videos, they're stuck with their devices. If the device is removed, the child may have what the family thinks is a tantrum, but what they're actually experiencing is the removal of the tool that allowed them to self-regulate. And so once a family can understand something like this and they can differentiate that type of an experience, well, then they can start to deal with that in a completely different way.
That's interesting. Tell me, let's take a step back. Tell me what autism is.
So autism is a neurological difference, and it presents differently, like a fingerprint with every individual. And like any other individual, they have areas of strengths and they have areas of need for support. And classically, labels have been placed on autistic people, so-called low functioning and high functioning. And a lot of progressive professionals are getting away from such labels because they don't really serve much of a purpose. So low functioning, high functioning might indicate the amount of support an individual needs, but it doesn't say much more than that. My daughter might be labeled low functioning because she doesn't speak and because she can't, walk to the school bus by herself, or because she might need support with her hygiene. But she can do double-digit multiplication in her head. She writes profound poetry. She is incredibly sensitive and bright, and I don't think she should be labeled low functioning. She may have certain needs that are unique, but she is a gifted child.
You use the term on the spectrum. What do you mean by that?
So it is a spectrum condition. A lot of autistic adults actually don't like the term on the spectrum. But if as a word, spectrum, I think it is apt because there is such a range of expression in terms of the autistic population.
Does your daughter have, does she go to school? Does she have assistance at school? Tell me about her lived life situation.
Mm-hmm. So depending on where she's at and at any given moment, whether or not she'd been experiencing more of her health challenges or perhaps regulation issues, we've had her in school or in home or some combination thereof. We live a very deliberate life in that we put together what makes most sense for her at that time. I'm lucky to have such flexibility. Many families do not.
Must be very tough on you and your husband.
It's he's no longer my husband. So, and this is not a unique case. It definitely does take a toll on families. And often two parents might, like to go a different path with the children. I have great support from my extended family and my friends, but of course it's still difficult. I have days sometimes where, it's difficult to climb up the stairs at the end of the day. Thankfully, those days are fewer and further between though at this point.
Do you have other children?
No, one is my only child.
Is autism genetic? Are there other autistic people in your family?
There are no autistic people in my close family. However, the genetic components of autism are still being discovered. And, if you look at the whole sort of neurodivergent or neurodiverse label, a lot of other conditions fall under that as well, like ADHD, for example, or anxiety disorders. So, we do have those people in my family, and you do see a bit of a higher prevalence in families with autistic children with other neurodivergent conditions.
Really, that's interesting. So there might be some connection between ADHD, anxiety, autism is what you're saying.
There is a much higher incidence of ADHD with autistic people.
Okay. So this is absolutely fascinating. And so you've got these different episodes that you talked about or other things that occur that you're tracking in the app for data purposes such that you can then do something with it. Does the app provide any recommendations on what to do or things to track, or does it just track?
So this is an important distinction here, actually. The app is not diagnostic or therapeutic. What the app does is takes the family's own data and turns that back around to them. So to start, it's at an individual level. We can say, we see this in the data associated with your child. We see this correlates with this. We might see quality of sleep significantly impacts mood the next day. And we can give them some detail on that, for example. Or we might see that there's something happening with the nutritional intake, and that is having an impact on a behavior.
But does the app suggest things to track, or do you have to come up with quality of sleep as a term?
So we have 12 modules that are part of the app, and we encourage families to track as much as they can with each module. So for example, we have a module called the Bio Diary, which tracks things like that are associated with GI health. And a family may say, well, actually my child has no such issues. And we would actually encourage them to track anyway, because often it is the case that they don't see a problem, but actually clinically the presentation is that there is a problem. And so we encourage them to try at least for a period of time and see if there might be something there.
Give me a sense of some of the other 12 modules, if you could.
Sure. So we have designed the app so that it's as unobtrusive to daily life as possible. And we say that tracking data is actually not a good use of families' time. And so we're trying to make it as simple as possible to use. Some of the modules you can interact with in seconds and you've logged a data point. So we have things like mood and emotion. And mood and emotion we look at as barometers that give us an indication about how other areas are tracking. So those things can be logged in seconds. Then there are things like the episodes, where they actually are asked a series of questions to describe the episode. And then we can look at that episode versus others, plus things, for example, in the daily calendar. So they would log if they're having certain therapy sessions during the day, how much physical activity the child had. We also have connected APIs where we look at things like the weather. So we can see the pollen index or the mold index or the change in barometric pressure, which might lead to a headache for a child, and we can alert the family to that. We also have a caregiver well-being module. So the caregiver well-being module actually comes from a clinical study where they looked at the efficacy or the effectiveness of different types of therapies with autistic children. And one of the therapies which they included was actually parental well-being, which isn't a therapy, but they treated it as one. And they looked at how supportive the parents were of the child, how accepting they were of the child's condition. And they found that that actually was a greater predictor of that child's well-being than any other therapy that child could be receiving. So we know that it's very important to track parent well-being, mental health, and physical health as well.
What about friends? I had thought that one of the challenge autistic people have is showing emotion and socializing. Is having friends important?
Having friends is important to autistic people. This is what I'm told. Many autistic people, many autistic adults that I now know, the way in which they choose to have a friendship might not be the same as the way you and I might have a friendship, but it is very important to them. And it's absolutely untrue that autistic people do not process emotion. They do. They might exhibit that emotion in a different way, but often they're actually quite sensitive people.
I was told that autistic people have difficulty with empathy, understanding other people's emotions, and that there was a program that was something like social display or social understanding to try to teach autistic children how to understand the social displays that other people are making. Is that true?
Some of these programs are great, right? And if a particular child has difficulty in processing emotion, and they want to understand that, and they want to respond in a way that other individuals understand, then great. But at the same time, we have to be careful not to force autistic people to behave in a way that is uncomfortable for them. Just like my daughter with verbal communication, I would never force her to communicate verbally. I want her to communicate with her letterboard if that makes her more comfortable. This is all about creating an environment where that autistic person is at the center, and where they are the most important individual, and they can thrive. If an autistic person is calm and happy and supportive, then they're going to have a greater tolerance for communicating in situations where it may not be ideal for them as well.
Some autistic people, some autistic children are violent. What do you do with that?
In my experience, any violent behavior, autistic child or not, is coming from a place of pain or fear or anxiety. And if we understand why that behavior is happening, then we can do something about it. I don't think anybody is inherently violent. So it's really about understanding the root cause. And that's what something like BeMeAi can do, is because we can look across medical, behavioral, and environmental and see what actually might be a trigger for an individual.
I know someone who has an autistic child who wants to harm themselves.
The autistic population is like the general population. Mental health is an issue with any segment of our population. And so it's not surprising if an individual is not supported, or they're in pain, or they feel massively misunderstood, that they would have greater mental health challenges.
There was a big controversy a little while ago about funding for autism. Where does that stand now?
Well, in Ontario, there's actually been some progress in terms of the type of funding that is available. So families do have greater options. There's a program called SSAH, or Special Services at Home, where families, if they're lucky and they get a budget, they can actually make decisions about where they would like to allocate that for their children.
We're chatting tonight with Sarah Glovcheski, who is the CEO of a company that is targeting data collection via an app for autistic children called BeMeAi. We're going to take a break for some final messages and come back with Sarah's concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Tonight, we're talking about autism, and our guest is Sarah Glofcheskie, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company by the name of BeMeAi. She's spent over 20 years working in life sciences, software, and tech. She's got an MBA from a European School of Management and Technology in Berlin, Germany. She has a daughter that was diagnosed, Flynn, at the age of 4, of having autism. Flynn is 10 today. And I think what Sarah said is that this was obviously the catalyst, the motivation for her to do something. And she, along with a team of people, have launched this company. And what it is it's a data-driven platform designed to empower autistic individuals by collecting a whole bunch of interesting data in 12 different modules and tracking that data such that they can understand what's happening in their lives, and episodes and health issues and gastrointestinal issues, caregiver issues, appointments, etc., that helps them live a better life. And I think that the title, the name of the company, BeMeAi, is profound and encouraging in its vision that autistic people, just like everyone, can be who they are. Sarah, when I was a young adult, I think I knew one autistic person. And just in the last year, I think that I've met 4 different people that have got autistic children. Why? Is there more autism today for some reason, or is there just more diagnosis of autism, or what's going on?
Certainly, we've gotten much better at identifying and diagnosing autism, and we've sort of widened the boundaries in terms of what we look for. And so that's a part of it. And then there are some other questions, right? Environmentally, what's going on? Is this having an impact? And is it creating a greater portion of our population to be neurodivergent? That's a question for science to answer as we move forward.
As a society, are we doing better in caring for autistic children, or worse?
I would like to think that we're doing better. We certainly can do much more. That is what BeMeAi's mission is all about, is about understanding the autistic individual from those 3 domains of medically, behaviorally, and environmentally. And as we do that, and as we understand more about the things that allow an autistic person to thrive, then we will get better and better.
Do prescription drugs have a role or not?
Prescription drugs can have a role with an autistic person like they can with a non-autistic person, but it shouldn't be a first course of action. We really do need to look at all of these different domains as they relate to the autistic person, to understand that if there is something else at play medically or in the environment, and so that we don't take a behavioral approach with medication only.
If you could sit down with the Minister of Health or the Premier of Ontario, what would you tell them?
I would ask them to continue working on the needs-based approach program and funding so that families have choices about options for their children and loved ones.
Do you have a final message that you want to leave with us?
Be kind.
Be kind to everybody.
Be kind.
So you wrote me something that I thought was very profound, and if it's okay, I'm going to read it. Autistic individuals deserve society's full efforts in terms of furthering inclusion at all levels, and they deserve to live gratifying, empowered lives. To do otherwise is a tragedy, as are the missed opportunities for contribution of unique and gifted individuals. Inclusion is a human right. I guess that's the long way of saying be kind.
Absolutely.
Sarah Glofcheskie, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to check out BeMeAi, how do they do that?
Please visit our website, BeMeAi. And if you're interested in participating in the cause or participating in our pilot, drop us a note.
I wish you and your daughter Flynn all the best.
Thank you very much.
That's our show for tonight, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm on every Monday through Friday on 9:60 a.m. Saga960am.ca. All my podcasts are available on Audible, Apple, and Speakeasy. And my videos are available on YouTube and Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.